This morning we continue in our Marked Message series. In this journey that we've been on, we've been looking at some of the various ways that God shows us that He puts His fingerprint on His children. And you've been hearing testimonies from individuals. We've been starting with the staff of just ways that God has marked them. And most importantly, we've been creating space in our gatherings for God to mark us as a congregation. And it's been exciting to see and hear the stories of the various ways that God has been marking you. And so just audience participation for a second. If you feel like over the conference last weekend or the last couple of weeks that you've experienced a touch from the Lord, a marking in a way that was significant for you, I'd be just curious. Would you be willing to raise your hand and raise your hands high? All right, just look around the room. God is at work. He's doing some cool stuff in our midst, so we're just thankful for that. So this morning, part 4 of the series, or the journey, is marked by destiny. And by that, we mean simply this, that every single one of us, you, me, all of us together have been uniquely marked by the Heavenly Father to make a difference with the design that He's given us. We've each individually been marked for a destiny. And we see this truth and saw this truth. We began to unpack this last week in Ephesians 2:10, which Kirsten's touched on this really last week. Says, we have become His poetry. We meaning the followers of Jesus. And what Kirsten taught on from this verse last week is it's about our design, that we are, each and every one of us, God's poetry. God's poem, a masterpiece is another way of translating the word poetry. And so we are each a unique masterpiece that's created by the hand of a master artist, a master designer, a master poet. And this verse then goes on to tell us that the master poet has purposed that the poetry of your life would do more than just collect dust on some volume on the shelf of world history. Right? That's not His purpose for writing the poetry of your life. Rather, He wrote the lines of your life to make the world a better place. So let's pick back up in verse 10. So we have become His poetry, a recreated people that will fulfill the destiny. Say destiny. That He's given each of us, for we are joined to Jesus, the Anointed One, and even before we were born, God planned in advance our destiny. Say destiny. Destiny. He planned in advance our destiny and the good works we would do to fulfill it, that being our destiny. So you are God's poetry, uniquely written in advance, according to God's plan for a destiny. You were written for good works to make an impact on the lives of people around you. And so every single one of us is a divine poem written for a divine purpose. And so here's our big idea. You were designed for a divine destiny. So the good works that this verse is talking about of our lives are good works towards others, is our service towards the Master Creator. Let me say that again. Our good works towards others is our service to the Master Creator. In other words, our poetry, the poetry of our lives, is the ministry of our lives. And so since every single one of us is God's poem, that means that every single one of us is God's minister. If our poetry is our ministry, and every single one of us is God's poem, that means every single one of us is God's minister. It's something we talk about here in the Vineyard a lot, that ministers are not the professional hired guns like me and Sheldon, Kirsten, and Derek, right? All of God's children are ministries. Every Christian is marked for ministry. And so we have this big idea. I am marked by divine destiny. I am marked to be a minister. And I'm not saying that for me. I'm saying that for you. And you're going to say it for yourself here in a second. Like right now, I am marked by divine destiny. Let's say that together. I am marked by divine destiny. All right, I want you to say it again, but mean it this time. I am marked by divine destiny. And so this morning, what I want to just quickly unpack is the journey of discovering that destiny. And it is a journey of discovery. In my experience and in the stories of the scriptures, I've rarely, if ever, seen, I don't know why scriptures came out that way, by the way. Did you notice that? In the scriptures, sorry. I have rarely seen in my own experience or in my study of the scriptures that God drops on a person the whole big picture of his or her divine destiny. Because I think if God were to do that to us, I think most of us would say, yeah, no, that ain't happening. If he gave us the whole big picture in one giant download. And so in my experience and what we see in the characters in the Bible is that God hands us bits and pieces, almost like puzzle pieces of the big picture of our divine destiny in measured doses so that we don't freak out, or for some of us, so we don't get ahead of them. And so we're going to look at the Apostle Paul's God-given destiny and how it was doled out and discovered in measured doses. And I want to say, by the way, in case some of you are thinking, all right, the Apostle Paul and me are not in the same category, right? He's got the big word apostle in front of his name, so he's kind of a big deal. But what I want to suggest to you, the Apostle Paul is really a good template for your life, for being called and marked by the Lord to ministry in the way that every single one of us is called to ministry. The Apostle Paul is a good point of connection for you. And so why would I see that is the Apostle Paul was really not some bigwig rock star in the Christian faith. He was not a superstar. Paul, we know, I think it's in Acts chapter 18, did what for a living? Anybody know? He made tents. Paul was a tent maker. So think about this. In the Middle Eastern culture of his time, what would that be the equivalent of? A tent maker. He made mobile homes. He made RVs. Apostle Paul was an RV manufacturer. That's not a stretch, you guys. It's not a stretch. If he lived here and now, he would be working at Keystone or Dutchman or Heckman Homes or something like that. That's what Paul did for a living. All right? So, here is the journey of discovering his destiny that is a journey very much like you and I are on. So Acts 22:6, this mobile home maker tells his story of being marked for divine destiny. And he says this, I was on the road, I'll unpack what was going on here in just a second. He's literally riding a horse. I was on the road approaching Damascus about noon, and a very bright light from heaven suddenly shone down around me, and I fell to the ground. He was knocked off his high horse, literally, and I fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to me, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Who are you, Lord? I asked. And the voice replied, I am Jesus the Nazarene, the one you are persecuting. And the people with me, Paul says, saw the light, but they didn't understand the voice that was speaking to me. And I asked, what should I do, Lord? And the Lord told me, get up and go into Damascus, and there you will be told everything that you are to do. Say, to do. All right, so this is like the destiny. This is what you're supposed to do. And what you see is that the Lord didn't give Paul the whole big picture. He didn't give him the whole download of his destiny. He just gave Paul the next step. Right? And then even once Paul got to Damascus, it says, go to Damascus, and there you'll be told everything you are to do. He didn't even get in Damascus, the whole download. The everything you are to do was really the everything you are to do next. Does that make sense? Everything you are to do next. And so the point is, the Lord didn't even give the Apostle Paul the whole big picture. And so the point of connection for you is you may not have a clear picture at this point in time of your divine destiny, of your everything you were created to do. And if that's the case, if you don't know what it is, that's pretty normal. You're in the same category as the Apostle Paul. The clarity won't come in one big, gigantic divine download, but the clarity of your destiny comes in a series of next steps. Next steps that are right in front of you right now. And so your divine destiny might not be clear up front, but it's often clarified in a series of next steps. That's the point. Some of you have heard my story of getting saved. Oh, you know what? I didn't. If we go back up the screen, the previous screen, I should say, I don't think I explained this. So Saul, by the way, Apostle Paul, Saul is just the Hebrew name for Paul. Paul is the Romanized version. What Paul was doing here, he was actually traveling. Paul didn't like Christians. Saul didn't like Christians, and so he was traveling around. He was seizing Christians so that they could be arrested and in some cases even executed. All right? So Paul was not a likely candidate for ministry. All right. What do you call it if you're in the Middle East and you seize Christians so that they can be executed? Oh yeah, he was a terrorist. He was a mobile home manufacturing terrorist. That is not a stretch. That's what the Apostle Paul was doing. And so again, this is why he's a good template for us. We are better people than the Apostle Paul was, right? Hopefully nobody here is a terrorist. All right? And so if somebody like this can be marked by God to make a difference in world history, so can I, and so can you. All right. Now, I am just way out of order on my notes now. I have no idea what I'm talking about. The Apostle Paul. He had dirt under his fingernails, and he had blood on his hands, and God called him and used him. I think there's hope for us. So some of you, have heard me tell a little bit of my story, how as, a wild child, 19-year-old studying engineering at Purdue University, God grabbed a hold of me and rescued me from myself. But within a few months of saving me, God put a very clear mark on my life and telling me in a way that has been unshakable for the whole of my life, that he was setting me aside. My destiny was going to be vocational ministry. I was going to get paid to do whatever I do. I'm hoping somebody knows, because, anyway. But I can tell you, at that point in time when God saved me and marked me for full-time ministry, he did not give me the whole picture. But being wired the way I am, I just immediately tried to take steps into trying to figure out the puzzle pieces that God wasn't handing me yet. And I'm not making this up. Like right after he said, I'm calling you to full-time ministry, I went to South America. I went to Peru. It's like, I'm going to be a missionary in South America. And once I got there, God said, no, I want you to go back to Purdue. It's like, oh, what? So I got back. I went to Denver, Colorado. I attended a youth pastor's training conference. Like, I know the next piece. I'm supposed to be a youth pastor. Literally had a stranger tell me there, nope, go back to Purdue. God wants you back at Purdue. And it's like, okay. I literally applied at a Christian Bible college. I need a Bible degree. God's calling me to ministry. Met with the dean of students, said, I think you're supposed to go back to Purdue. I think just nobody actually wanted me is what it was. They're like, why don't you stay where you are? I went on a year or two later, I went on a summer missions trip with a Christian campus organization, thinking maybe I'm supposed to be a Christian campus minister. God said, go back to Purdue. All right. And so it was very frustrating for me to try to figure out the puzzle pieces that God wasn't giving me yet. But the point is, for me, just even the unfolding of my divine destiny was given in a series of next steps. Just this one next step that was right in front of me. And that has pretty much been God's process in my life for 37 years now and counting. And can I be honest with you guys about something, as opposed to everything else, which is not honest, apparently? So, if God had told this 19-year-old who had just graduated from Wawasee High School when he was at Purdue that the divine destiny would bring me back to Syracuse, Indiana, where I'd be a preacher, yeah. I love you guys, but I would have said, that ain't happening. I will go anywhere on the planet except back to Syracuse, Indiana. So nothing, Do you love me still? Can I say that and you're all right? Right? Wawasee students, right? There is nothing going to be more exciting than Wawasee in the rearview mirror, right? Nico agrees. So, yeah, God is too smart to give us the whole big picture because we would just screw it up. And so he just doses it out in measured doses so that we can learn the things that we need to learn and taking the steps that we need to take. All right, just very quickly, let me unpack just a couple more points. From Paul's journey about our journey of discovering our divine destiny. Our divine destiny is clarified in our life experiences, both good and bad. Both good and bad. So in verse 11, Paul says, I was blinded by the intense light, and I had to be led by the hand to Damascus by my companions, and a man named Ananias lived there, and he was a godly man, deeply devoted to the law, and well regarded by all the Jews of Damascus. And he came, and he stood beside me. And he said, Brother Saul, regain your sight. And at that very moment, I could see. And so we see here from just this little snapshot of Paul's story and in other places that we see in Scripture of Paul's story, that Paul's life experiences, and both the good experiences of his life and the rough, the difficult experiences of his life, like being blinded, and then being healed by the hand of God of being blinded. We know from things that Paul says in some of his writings that there was some sort of physical ailment that Paul struggled with over time. There were ongoing eye challenges. We know that Paul was not a gifted speaker. There was something wrong with his speech. All right? And these bad aspects, you would think, of Paul's journey became part of his destiny. His life experiences shape the way God used him. His educational background, his cultural background, his work experience as a mobile home manufacturer. God used all of that recipe to uniquely mark Paul to do something that nobody else was able to do. He was a unique recipe. All right, and the same is true of you. The exact same thing is true of you. There is absolutely no one else on planet Earth and no one else ever in world history who has the exact same mixture, the exact same recipe of life experiences, both good and bad, that combine to make you a divine poem. The lines of your life will make a difference in somebody's life that mine can't, because I don't have your life experiences. Does that make sense? So that is an important part of discovering our journey, the journey of discovery, is bringing those things into focus that God has written into the lines of our lives. You'll notice in your sermon notes, I have some questions for reflection, and I want to encourage you to take a few moments this week to jot down some thoughts. So the first two questions are, what are some of your life experiences, good and bad, that are part of your unique recipe? Right? Some of you have heard me say before, part of my life journey has been watching both of my parents taken out by senile dementia and Alzheimer's. Right? That's been a painful part of my journey, but I have seen God use kind of that dark poetry of my life to make a difference in the lives of people who are now going through that with their parents. Right? We're uniquely shaped by our life experiences to make a difference, the good purposes that God pre-planned for us a long time ago. How might God use your life experiences, good and bad, to impact others? All right, so our divine destiny is clarified in life experiences, both good and bad. Next point is our divine destiny is clarified in the affirmation of others. We've really already seen that in Ananias standing beside Paul, in ministering to him and healing him. In verses 14 through 16, Paul continues to say, Then Ananias told me, the God of our ancestors has chosen you to know his will and to see the righteous one, meaning Jesus, and to hear Jesus speak. And for you are to be his witness, telling everyone what you have seen and heard. So what are you waiting for? Get up, be baptized, have your sins washed away by calling on the name of the Lord Jesus. And so this man, Ananias, just came alongside this tent maker, terrorist, and called out of him the divine fingerprint that was on his life. God used the people around the Apostle Paul to clarify the puzzle pieces of the big picture. And that is just absolutely true in our lives too. The journey of discovering our divine destiny is called out by the people around us. And this is why it's important to be in fellowship in the body of Christ, to be serving in the body of Christ, because it's in that context that our calling is clarified and called out even by others around us. Does that make sense? All right. So that's the second point or third point. I'm not sure what number I'm on. But last few verses of Paul's story in Acts 26, as well as in other snapshots of Paul's journey in the New Testament, there's just two more principles that I want to tease out about our journey of discovery. And I'm not actually going to take you to the passages just in lieu of time. I just want to give you 2 bullet points, and then I want to hand the mic over to Brittany Callahan, who's on staff here, just to share her journey of discovery of her destiny. And so these are the 2 bullet points. Our divine destiny is clarified in faithful service. Say faithful service. And it's clarified in trial and error. Try that one. All right, so what you need to understand is the Apostle Paul didn't step out from the story that he's telling in Acts chapter 26 and begin to immediately and fully operate in his big picture design. In fact, we know from the book of Galatians, the New Testament book of Galatians, that Paul spent between 14 and 17 years of clarity coming, over 14 to 17 years. God is never in as much of a hurry as we are to get to where he's taking us. 14 to 17 years. And what was Paul doing during that 14 to 17 years? He was just faithfully serving with the puzzle pieces he had in his hand up to that point in time in his journey. Does that make sense? Right? And so we too discover our divine design in faithful service where we are right now. Where we are right now. And then part of the process then of faithful service is trial and error. Trial and error, just learning, I do this pretty well. I do this horribly. I can tell you from my own experience, my own journey of discovery, that as I faithfully served in this place or that place or the other, that I often discovered as much about how I was not wired. Not this, as much about how God had designed me. So for example, probably most of you don't know this. I don't even know if Derek knows this. In the first church that I served in, I was the youth pastor. Nope. Not the way I'm wired, not the poetry of my life. And so we discover our divine design through trial and error as we faithfully serve where we are right now. And so what I'm going to do with that is I just really want to hand the microphone over to Brittany to tell you about her own journey and experience of discovery. So welcome, Brittany.
So as Kent said, I'm going to share with you today a little bit about my actual journey, not just a particular story of living out my destiny, but kind of the journey that God has had me on the last several years. So just to give you a quick background, I grew up in a Christian home. I gave my life to Jesus when I was 8 and was baptized shortly after that. And really from a young age, had this understanding that I had a unique design and purpose and that I was made for something great. So fast forward to about graduation from high school in early 20s, and I began to have this desire to really understand what that call and that unique design was. So I thought, okay, I want to go after this. So around that time, I had someone share a word with me, and they said, Brittany, God has called you to stand in the gap. And at the time, it resonated pretty deeply with me, but I thought, well, I have no idea what that means. So I kind of just didn't really feel like I had a lot of revelation with it. So I put it on the back shelf and just began to follow God in what I was doing. So I began kind of a season of a lot of opportunity where I kind of just found myself with these open doors always in front of me. I didn't really have to pursue things. It just seemed like there were always open doors in front of me, and all I had to do was step into it and say yes. they were very short-lived seasons. None of them were for very long, sometimes a couple months, sometimes a year or two. So out of high school, I went and did some continued education. I lived overseas for a year. I worked in the salon for a year. I did a few jobs in administration. And so it was kind of just this series of one thing to the next to the next. And on top of that, along with my career choices, I also had this understanding that I knew that I was, as a follower of Jesus, I needed to serve and to be in the community, in the church. And so I served in probably about every possible area of ministry in the church that you can imagine. And through a lot of those times, I kind of realized, but I don't know, this kind of feels like, maybe a good fit. And a lot of, ministries, I realized, no, I was definitely not made to do this. And so this season went on for several years, and I kind of started to get to the point where I felt a little bit confused because it felt like all of these pieces were just very random in my life, and none of them were really amounting to a greater clarity as to this, understanding of my design and my destiny. And so I thought, I thought I was following God in this, but was I not following him? Am I getting distracted? It just seemed like nothing was amounting to anything. And my whole life, I have been surrounded by people in full-time ministry. And I recognized in them that, they would connect deeply with this call to full-time ministry. And I longed for that same kind of connection to know this is what I was made to do. But I knew I'm not called to be a full-time pastor. I had no desire to do that. And so on this one hand of knowing this is not what I was made to do, there was also, on this other side, this desire to understand what I was made for. And I believed that I was made for more than just ordinary things because I was made by an extraordinary God. And so during that time, God just kind of brought me back to this place where I realized that I kind of lost focus on him, that I had become too consumed with trying to find answers and to make sense of all of these pieces in my life, that I had lost focus of why I was doing it and who I was doing it for. And so I kind of just came to this place of surrender where I just said, okay, God, I trust you. I trust that you know the plan for my life and that it's okay that I don't have the answers. And so I came to this place of really just a new surrender in my heart towards God and a new dedication to just love and serve him in every area of my life and to just be faithful to where he had placed me in that moment. And so in my job, in the community, in family relationships and friendships, I just said, okay, I'm going to stop searching for answers and I'm just going to love and serve you with everything that I do. Not long after that, life took a bit of a radical turn for me, and I suddenly found myself in a very dark and lonely and difficult season of life. It was a season of a lot of hardships. Some of it was circumstantial, and some of it was events. Some of it was kind of the internal place that I was in my own life. And at first, I had this resolution that I was just like, okay, God, I believe that you're using this for my good. And so I was able to kind of just hold steady in it. But the more that the season, went on and on and on, I started to feel weaker. I felt like I was losing my strength and ability to continue to make it through one hardship after another. And I kind of started to feel a little bit abandoned by God. He felt very distant to me. And I felt like maybe I was being punished for something. I felt like maybe I deserved it. And so all of these questions, in that dark place began to come in and make me question the things about my value and about who I believed God to be. And so I started to become a little bit angry towards God. I didn't understand the purpose of this dark season that lasted for such a long period in my life. And quite honestly, I felt, that anger turned into a bit of resentment towards God. I tried to reconcile what I felt, but I couldn't. And it was, my whole life I had been raised with this understanding and this knowledge that God is good. And suddenly I found myself in a place where my reality felt like everything except what a good God is like. And so I tried to reconcile that. I felt like a terrible Christian to even acknowledge to myself that I was questioning the goodness of God. And it was difficult for me to, verbalize it to myself, let alone the people around me. And so I came to this place of striving where I was just desperate to find answers because I was unwilling to deny what I knew about God, but I also couldn't deny what my reality and my experience of God felt like in that time. And so I found no answers, and I kind of just got to a place where I said, okay, fine, God, I'm not really sure what you're doing in this, and I'm probably never going to understand it, so we're just going to shove it in a box and pretend like it never happened. But that resentment grew in me, and it was a place that I couldn't find peace with. And at the time, I still had really no idea what I was called to and what my destiny was. But in that moment, in that season of my life, I felt like I was the furthest from my calling that I could ever possibly be. During that season, I went to New Zealand, and I'd been a couple times, and there's a specific beach that I would walk, and it was sort of on this peninsula. There was a peninsula, and the beach was on the east side of it, and the harbor was on the west side of it, and so you could kind of walk, from the boat side and go around and onto the beach side. And this space was a place that had become very sacred for me. I felt like when I would go there and walk, suddenly it didn't matter what was going on in my life. I could be close to God. I could be connected to Him. And it was just like no matter what was happening in life, it was all just kind of went on the back burner. So in this particular visit, my friends had said to me, hey, we thought maybe we'd take you out for a boat ride at night so you can, get a feel for what it'd be like to be out in the ocean in the evening. And so I was like, cool, that sounds fun. So we jump into the boat and began to hit out on, the open waters. And it's winter time, it's, pitch dark, and there's just this incredible feeling of being, almost swallowed up by the ocean when you can't see anything, and the water is just so powerful, and you kind of feel like you're going to be taken over by the water. And there's a sense in which you feel like, I know that I'm safe because I'm inside the boat and I have a life jacket, but this feels like a very overpowering force. And so I kind of started to find myself in this place of just like in awe of just the goodness and the bigness and the majesty of who God was. So as we kind of hit open waters, my friends say to me, hey, let's go over to the other side, of this peninsula so you can see what your beach looks like from the other perspective looking in. And so, because I would always, walk the beach and look out into the ocean, and so they took me out into the boat, so I was out in the ocean looking into the land that I had known so well and that had become so familiar to me. And when they said that, I suddenly felt like I had just been punched in the gut. And I felt like something just broke in me so deep. And God said, Brittany, that's what I'm going to do for you for this last season. I'm going to take you to the other side of this darkness. And I'm going to show you my perspective. I'm going to show you the other side of this. And so as we were in the water, kind of coming up to the beach, I saw this strip of land that I had become so familiar with. And it was so tiny in light of, all of this land and water that surrounded it. And there was so much beauty in it, with all of, the moon shining on it and the lights. And I began to see this place as a place that was beautiful to me, and God began to just take me through this, season of darkness in my life, and He just walked me through all of these places where He showed me His goodness that had actually been with me the whole time, and that through all of the season that He really was the God that I actually knew. He began to show me that it was in that season He was forming me into the maturity and the character that I needed to live out the fullness of my call. He showed me that it was really His kindness and His compassion to me that kept me in that season of darkness, because I was, I still am pretty stubborn, but I'm very stubborn. At the time I struggled with a lot of distrust, a lot of control. I was very performance driven. I found so much of my value in what I did. And in that place of weakness, all of that was just stripped away from me, and I was just left with, nothing but my weakness in God. And God just began to build this new foundation where I began to find my value in Him, and He began to just instill in me these character qualities and this impartation that I was going to need to actually live out in my destiny when that time came. And it was also during that time, He reminded me of the word that was spoken over me years ago about how He had called me to stand in the gap. Suddenly I saw like this flashback of my life where I could see all of these things that felt so random in my life were actually very specific assignments that God had put me in a place where I was standing in the gap for a situation or for a person or for an event. And He said, Brittany, this whole time you feel like you've been the furthest from your calling, but you've actually been in the very midst of your calling as you've walked with me and you've said yes every step of the way. So out of that season of darkness and this new perspective, I began to approach how I saw my destiny, my calling differently. God just began to just instill in me this realization that my calling and my destiny is less about actually reaching a destination, and it's more about how I walk with Him in the journey of saying yes, and in the journey of obedience, in the journey of intimacy. So out of that season, I began to kind of experience a new season where suddenly there was a lot of life. I had a lot of others, leaders in my life affirming to me some of my gifts and my calling and where God was asking me to show up. And I began to have opportunities to step into some of the places that He had really destined me for. And so I began to feel some more of this clarity of affirming, even though I don't have the big picture, I have more of an understanding, and I know that God's working in every season of my life, no matter where I am. I was in that season, I was at a conference, and God spoke to me and said, during this time, I'm going to give you an impartation of my heart to be able to love and to see others with compassion. And so it was a time in which He was doing a work in me that wasn't necessarily related to my character. It wasn't a word that He gave me, but there was this impartation. I could feel Him just filling me with new measures of His heart that I was going to need to walk out every step of my calling. Not long after that, I had a vision of my destiny. And it was not in any kind of detail, but it was sort of like a landscape. And as I saw this vision, I felt like in my heart, suddenly there was this desire to just run. I just knew as soon as I saw it, like that was where I was made to be. And I wanted so badly to be there. But all of a sudden, this thought came into my head, and it was like, but what if I'm not good enough? And there was just like this, I felt this halting in me that I couldn't step forward and just run to that place that I felt like God had made me for. And God was kind of standing on the side in this vision, and He said, Brittany, I've already given you everything you need to walk in this. All you got to do is ask me for courage. And so I started asking Him, God, fill me with courage because you've made me for this. I know that, I believe that, but I need your help to say yes to this because it feels scary sometimes, and I feel like I don't have what it takes to do this. And so it's kind of been through this journey that God has brought me into this place of just being able to value how we are formed in this journey, that we are formed by love, through love, and for love. And that's really where it all starts, that it's out of God's love for us that we are first formed. It's His love that brings us in and through that formation. And then it's for His love and for His glory that we're able to live that out into our lives and to live our destiny. So I'm going to have the worship team come forward, and we're just going to transition into a little bit of just response time. And so just in closing, I just want to say that my journey has been pretty messy. It's not at all what I thought it was going to be. I thought that it was going to be very clear. I thought maybe there would be, steps laid out. I had a pretty good plan for my life when I graduated high school. And God pretty much just completely wrecked that, but in the best way possible. And so He's just invited me to see that there's a lot of treasure and there's a lot of joy that comes when we partner with him in the journey, and we embrace that he's got the ultimate plan, and he'll reveal it to us in his timing. And so I just really want just to challenge you today that as we move into this time of response, to just begin to take notice of where you're at in your journey. We're going to have, the worship band is just going to do a little bit of instrumental music. And I'm just going to give you a few questions to think about, to just prompt you into connecting with where you're at in your journey of destiny and calling. So you can just remain seated. Just go ahead and close your eyes. Father, I just ask that in this moment that you would bring us into a deeper awareness of your love for us. I pray that you would draw our attention to notice the things in our journey that have felt weighty, or the things that maybe sparkle and stand out to us. So just quietly between you and God, just begin to dialogue about these questions. Where are you on your journey of destiny? What is your experience of God in that place? Where is he? How does he seem to you? What is he inviting you into today?